Okay, so let's do one thing first. Okay, I'm just creating some folder structure here. Depends on the the types of resource files or all this whatever we use. So all the scripts will be stored here in scripts folder. Then you'll say object repositories, and also we may create function libraries, right? And also we may create recovery scenarios, but if required. Okay, then we also generate some customized logs, and we may need to use customized logs. Then also we need to maintain the test data files, and then we also do some configuration like environment variables and all we need to use. Okay, so now I just created some folder structure, whatever the files or whatever the entities and all there in a automation. So we'll start implementing one by one now. Okay, so first thing that what you need to do is let me create a test here. So script has to be stored here. Okay, so this is where the location has to be stored, and you say create order into intent scenario. Okay, I'm just creating. Click on create. Then so what let's take few functionalities. One of the functionalities here, let's say first whenever we launch the application, first we need to make sure that all the existing browsers are closed, right? We have to close all the existing browsers. Then how do we close all the existing browsers? Okay, so first we have to create a browser object. So I think I already told. Did I tell this? How to close all the browsers? First you create the description object and define the browser object first. How do we do that? Set oBrowser equals to description.create oBrowser of mclass.value equals to browser. Then set oBrowser collection equals to desktop dot child objects of oBrowser. What this does, this returns the collection of browser objects. Then you can say for I equals to 0 to oBrowser collection dot count -1. You know what I'm doing there? I'm just getting the count of the number of browsers. The desktop is one of the utility object here. Where is a desktop.child objects, then it will retrieve the collection of objects which are opened on the desktop currently. Okay, which are opened. Then instead of getting all the objects, I want to get only the browser objects which are opened, only the browsers which are opened on the desktop. Then that's the reason what I'm doing here. The description object whatever I have created, then I made the description object to represent only the browser object. How it represents only browser object? Because I provided the class object as a browser here, class as a browser for that, right? Description object. So it represents only the objects which are having the class as the browser. So since oBrowser represents only the browser object, this child objects will retrieve collection of only the browser objects here. Then what I'm doing is here, so all the browser collection will be stored in oBrowser collection variable, and I'm looping from 0 to the total count -1. Okay, because inside I will be using index, so that I'm starting with the 0. Since I'm starting with the 0, then it should end with -1. Then say collection of I dot close. Then where is that? Desktop is an utility object, that what we have here. Okay, so let me open some browsers here. Okay, so I have opened few browsers. If you run the code and see whether it will close all the browsers or not. Can you see? All the browsers have been closed. Okay, then so what you need to do is here, since okay this is going to be a common feature for all the test cases, then we need to make this as a function, say close browsers. Then we'll say end function. Take this, and this function, since I need to use it for I need to use it in all the scripts, right? If I keep this function inside the action, then I can use this function only within this action. So what you need to do here, take this out, and we need to store it in function library. Then we need to create a new function library. How do we create a new function library? There are various ways that you can create. Then there are 3 different extensions that UFT supports for function library. What are all those extensions? It supports TXT, or it supports it supports VBS, and it supports QFL. Okay, so 3 types of library, 3 extensions. So you can say with any of the extension here, either TXT or QFL or VBS. Okay, so where did we save this? Let me create a new function library, and let me go to the scripts here, function libraries here, then make this as a common functions.vbs. So we are going to create multiple function libraries here, depends on the categories. We need to categorize the function libraries, like okay, the functions which we use across all the scripts, not only, see, this closing browsers are not related to particular application. For any application or any project that you take, closing browsers will be common. So these functions, what you need to do is, instead of keeping them along with the other functions, you categorize the functions which will be used common across all the projects. Then we store them in one library, the common functions, like closing browser or launching browsers, or doing some cleanup, or retrieving the data from Excel, or retrieving the data from database, or database connections, all those, generating the log of files, right? Or you're working with the files, some functions and all. So such kind of things will be used, or used across all the projects. So keep them in the common functions. Next, there are certain functions which we use only at particular application level, like only in this application, but all the modules, those functions are applicable. Then we keep them in one more library, say application level functions, like that we created. Then we also create another library called the module specific functions. Like for one module, we create lot of scripts, but those functions or those functionalities will be used or will be common only in those modules, module related scripts. So we create one more library for module specific functions. Like this, we can create different function libraries, depends on the category or where we use those functions, level of use. Now what I'm doing here, I'm creating, I just created one library, and the library name I have given as common functions. Then So just created one function. Now what you have to do is, now whatever the library file library that you have created, that library has to be associated with the test, right? Then only you will be able to use those functions. If you don't associate that library, then even though you have created a lot of functions and stored in the library, you will not be able to use them. The reason why we can't use, because script cannot understand or cannot locate it until unless you associate that library. Okay. Right. So I have associated, but not all the time we associate through settings. But initially, like while designing the scripts or while writing the scripts and all, we should have those libraries or those functions available for us. We should have those functions available for us. So we have to associate through settings, but we also have some methods, to load those function libraries during runtime. But when we use those methods, those function libraries will be loaded only while executing the script. So those functions and all will be available only while execution. But while writing the scripts, I need to understand which functions I can use in my script and which functions can be used and all I need to understand, right? So those functions should be available during design time also while writing the scripts, right? So that's the reason we are associating using setting. But later, once the scripting is completed, we will remove from there and we associate by using runtime methods. The reason why we associate from runtime methods, to manage the libraries dynamically, or sometimes what happens is the path of the libraries will be keep changing, or the count of the libraries will be changing. So in such cases, if we associate using runtime methods, that will be more easy for us, right? So later we have to associate those. We will come to that part little later. Okay, then say close process. Fine. Next thing is here, I need to launch the browser. So when you need to launch the browser, let's say for example, like the application whatever we are working on is expected to test in multiple browsers, right? So different browsers, or sometimes I need to execute in Internet Explorer, or sometimes I need to execute in Chrome browser, or sometimes I need to execute in Firefox browser, and now it supports Safari browser as well. At the same time, sometimes URL also will be changing. Like assume that I have different environments available. Sometimes I need to execute my scripts in dev environment directly, or sometimes I need to execute in QA, or sometimes I need to execute in staging environment, or sometimes I need to execute in a different environment it could be. So the environment keeps changing here. So whenever the environment gets changed and all, obviously the URL or the credentials will be changing. So application URL also changes, application URL, because it will deploy to a different server, right? So test URL is depending on the server. So in such cases, what you need to do is, instead of directly providing the browser and the URL here, since those are dynamic, then it's good if we can parameterize it instead of directly. Then how do we parameterize and where do we need to store here? So all this, like the URL or the browser, the type of the browser, or some credentials, database credentials, so all those related to the configurations, right? So such kind of configurations usually can be stored in the XML files. Okay, XML files, or you can use environment is external environment variable. Okay, then so what I will do is, here assume I am using external environment variable file. Okay, external environment variable file. Let me create a new environment variable file here quickly. How do we do that? This is where we need to save. Give the file name as environment.xml. Fine. So how the environment file can be created? It should have the tag called environment. So it should start with the environment, that is the root element here, and another one is here. For every variable you should have a tag called variable. So for one variable tag that you need to use. Then next, every variable will have a name. What is the name of the URL? First, okay, I will give browser type, or what is the browser that needs to be executed. Okay, then every URL, every variable will have a value. Browser type I am saying here is chrome.exe. chrome.exe. So this is for one variable. Similarly, one more variable that we need to create. So this time what I am doing is URL. What is the URL that we need to use here? login.salesforce.com. So I have created two variables. Then what you have to do now is I need to associate this variable file to the script. So then only I will be able to retrieve the value. Then let me take this path, but later path also should be changed. So instead of directly giving, because the path will be keep changing, right? One system to another system, path may get changed. Now how do we associate that environment variable file to the script? I want to use those variables are created externally, so I want to use those environment variables in my script. What should I do? How do we do that? It's an environment variable file I want to use. So how do we associate external environment variable file? Okay. Okay. Before you are missing something. Settings, environment, select user defined. You need to select this checkbox and then navigate further. That is one. I also told one more thing here. What is that? Environment at, see, these things are very important things, okay? Using I told that it's important also. Environment dot load from file. Okay, so now what I'm doing here, what I'm doing, I'm retrieving the values from the environment variables, but before that you must have to load the external environment variable file. So how we are loading? Environment dot load from file. Okay, so remember this at least this time. Then how do we launch the browser? Systeml dot run. Str browser, comma, str URL. Then what's the next step once you launch the browser? First we need to verify whether the browser has been, Salesforce browser has been launched or not, right? Then how do we verify Salesforce browser is launched or not? First let me run whether it's launching or not, you'll see. It's launching the browser, right? I need to verify whether the Salesforce browser has been launched or not. Then let's do one thing. Since we have to manage descriptive and shared repository approach both, but how we need to when we go for repository and when we go for descriptive programming is when the objects are not repeated. That means object comes in only one screen and won't be repeated in different functions. Second one is if the objects are very dynamic or repeated in multiple hierarchies, or sometimes when we need to work with collection of objects and all, okay, then we need to go for descriptive. So like this, we have certain situations where we have to go for this, where we need to use descriptive programming. So we need to judge. Now if you say browser and page will be common throughout, right? So I need to use the same browser and same page object almost in every in all the test cases. So that's the reason what I will do is first I will store the parents in the object repository. Which object repository? Shared repository. How do we create shared repository? Okay. You have to tell. It's one step go to give the solution, right? No, one step, just saying one step won't give solution. We have to explain the flow. You guys just tell one method and then stop. So what I did there? So you should tell like, okay, so open the object repository, in the object repository manager, and then you just add the objects and save it. And when you save the repository from repository manager, it will obviously a shared repository. That's it. So you must have to tell the flow, then only that will be clear. But how you guys tell just one method. But that method may be there, but in between somewhere that method will come, right? So that's not the way to tell. I mean in the interviews also. So whenever you are explaining, just explain the flow. Then only it will be clear for everybody. You know what I am doing? Any browser which has got the Salesforce here, because the browser name will be keep changing from here for every navigation that we do. Okay, so that's the reason I'm using the regular expression here. Okay, any browser which has got the name as Salesforce, then. And if multiple browsers are there, if you see that here ordinal identifier, what I am doing, creation time as 0. So that means any first Salesforce browser. Okay. Then save it, and where we need to save under object repositories. Then, so what I need to do, I need to use that repository, right, in my script. Then we need to associate that repository in my script. How do we associate? How do you associate shared repository? Huh? Okay. Repository manager is to create. Okay. Associate repositories. Navigate to the repository and select the action and click on OK. So go to associate repositories and then navigate for the repository, add the repository and select the actions and then OK. So that repository will be associated. Then if browser dot exist, if Salesforce browser exists, then you say that reporter dot report event make pass, launch the browser and navigate to URL Salesforce browser has been launched, else you say report event make fail what I am doing here. I just created one more function, say launch browser. Then the second step, once you close all the browsers, you have to launch the browser. What is the next step? We need to log into the application, right? So we need to log into the application. Then how do we log in? Then okay, so we need to enter the username and we need to enter the password, and then we need to click on login button, and then we need to verify whether the login is successful or not. And when you look at this username, password and this login button, right, this comes only in login screen, nowhere else it comes. Since we need to create one function for login, those objects will come only in login screen, nowhere else those will come. So that's the reason those objects can be maintained in descriptive programming, but the browser and page is already added to the repository, right? So browser and page can be taken from repository where only this child object, like the username or password and the login button, only these three are descriptive. So we have to use the combination, like hybrid approach in these steps. So parent is in repository, child is in descriptive, right, for all this. So that possibility is there. Then how do you do? Then you say browser dot page. Then this browser and page is common right across all the scripts. In the same browser and same page we are going to use common across all the scripts. Then in that case, then instead of rewriting the browser and page again and again, then so do one thing. So I'm just defining this like this. But if you define like this, again OPage can be used. Okay, OPage can be used only in this particular action, right? So when I define OPACE here, that can be used only in this action. But this browser and page object are globally, you can use them, right? So OPACE is globally used. That means in all the scripts which are related to this particular project, which is we need to use this browser, same browser and same page object. So that's the reason I have to make that OPACE as global. That's not only in this action, I need to make it as global. How do we do that? What I'm doing here, I'm creating one more library called global variables.vbs. So I'm maintaining one more function library here, global variables, and then keep that OPACE here. But you must have to declare whatever the variables which needs to be used across all the scripts, just keep those variables in one library. Then wherever you want to use, then what you can do is go to file, settings, associate that library also here. Okay. Apply. Now if you say OPACE, then that will automatically recognize that page object. Then I need to enter the username and password. But what we need to do is say, some time back we just learned some error handling techniques. One of the error handling technique is we follow the conditional statements, all those, right? Then whenever we need to enter a value to the edit field, what we did exactly, first, okay, we have to verify whether the object exists or not, and we have to verify whether the object is enabled or not, and then we have to verify whether the input is right or not, and in case if the input is not right, then stop the execution. So accordingly, whatever the condition fails, then report accordingly, and then fail the script, and then stop the execution. So that's what we learned, right? So every event that we perform, we were doing some precondition check. So for every action that whatever we are performing. So here what we are doing, we are entering the username. So that means entering the value into the edit field. That's what we are trying to do, some value to the edit field. So that edit field is username field, and that value is the username, right? So what you need to do now, instead of directly setting the value to that username, you have to verify whether that exists or not, enabled or not. So such kind of preconditions need to be verified. Then if I write these conditions for every object, then unnecessarily the lines of code will be increased. That's the reason what we did, we created the function, and instead of calling those functions, what we did again, then we converted that function to as a method by registering that function as a method to one of the test object, right, for web editor. That's what we have learned. Then how do we do that now? If oedit.exist, then exist should be immediate because we wait for the navigation and all. Then if oedit.getRO property of disabled equals to 0, disabled must be 0. Then if trim of str input is not empty, then oedit.set. You know what I'm doing here? I'm just checking the condition. Else reporter.report event make warning, then say str step name, whatever the step that you need to execute, and then say input is empty, please provide a valid input. Since it is just a warning, then because sometimes I may need to enter some empty inputs also, so I am not stopping the execution here for input. Then this else is for disabled. Then you can say reported dot report event make fail, then str step name, input field is disabled, unable to set the value. Then what we need to do, else, if this else means exist, in case if the exist is not, if it is disabled, okay, input field does not exist or not identified by tool, please recheck and run again. Etc. So that's all, we have to validate the condition. Then what I'm doing here, so make this as one function. Say function enter value into edit field, then oedit comma str input, second input str step name. Okay, so we got this. Then so what you do, copy this function, and this is not common function of global variables. Let me create one more function library here, and this time what I am doing is, this is not application, event functions. So all the event related functions we store it in another library. Then since okay, I need to convert this library as a method, then what should I do here is, register user function, what are the inputs? First, for which class of object we need to register that function. Second one is method name is set value, that is a method name, new method name I am giving. Then third one is which functions, and fourth one, do you want to make it as default or not? Then so just by default it will be false. Do it. Now next what you have to do, we need to associate that library to the test. So like this we are increasing the library count. Then now we'll say web edit of inspect element. I'm not using just object spy. What I'm doing is I'm just directly getting from this. So inspect element, its input type is email, and name as username, ID as username. So I'm taking ID is nothing but the HTML ID. Dot set value. Now str input. Str input, from where that has to come? Should I hard code it? No, because the usernames also will be keep changing, right? Then from where this str username is stored, and from where I have to get this value. And again this, the master username or master password, right? Login user URL. Maybe that is one of the configuration info. So what you need to do is store it in environment variable section. So open it in Notepad. Then what I'm doing is here, username. What is the username? This is my username, right? Then, so since we are already loading the environment variable file here in the beginning, then I don't need to load it again. Say str username equals to environment dot value of username. Then enter password again. Say opus dot web edit of HTML ID equal to inspect element. It is password. The ID is password. Dot set value str password. Enter password. Then what's the password here? This is the password, right?